Au revoir.
Hello and welcome to another episode of FitPet Boston Talks. My name is Leah Lodato. I am the host of the show. I'm a dog trainer and a dog walker. I work in the greater Boston area alongside my wife and partner, Leah Lodato. If you've listened to the podcast in the past, you know that we interview local Boston area dog handling professionals. We talk about our lives, our dogs, and our careers. So this is a little resource for you to learn more about who's in the area doing work professionally. Laurie and I also do deep dives on specific topics, and these episodes are timeless. So if this is your first time listening, please check out the episodes prior. Really, really cool stuff. And leave us a rating or review if you like what you are hearing, because it helps us reach more people. So in the past month or two, I have been keeping my cadence up on these episodes, and I'm receiving some pretty amazing feedback from our listeners. I probably get a text message or a message on social media every day from people that are listening, at least one person a day, just saying how much they appreciate what we have to say and how much they, also appreciate us taking the time to be vulnerable, because Laurie and I don't make any money from doing this project. I do it because I really enjoy talking to people. I enjoy learning more about our local community. And for me, it's a way to give back. However, the majority of our time is really focused on our clients, making sure our client relationships are strong, making sure that we are there for our clients. And, this podcast is kind of reaching everybody. And as much as I, love strangers on the internet, we love our clients as well. So this is kind of a labor of love and something that I enjoy. I will try my best to keep up with the project. And today I'm doing my first ever solo episode. So I'm going to be talking about flea and tick preventatives and some different options that you can consider when you are deciding how to prevent fleas and ticks from biting your dog. So there's a lot to consider here, and I'm going to try to be as concise as possible. As far as my references go, I looked on the CDC website, tons of information there. I also just looked at the product pages for the medications themselves, which was pretty insightful. I looked on yaleMedicine.org and also Dogs Naturally magazine. A lot of what I have to say today is also going to be opinion and anecdote. So I'll tell you what we use on our own dogs, why we use the products that we use. And at the very end of the podcast, I'm just going to share things that can affect your decision making when it comes time for you to decide what to use on your dog. Okay, so first and foremost, let's just talk about Massachusetts in general. So Massachusetts is fourth in line behind Pennsylvania, New York, and New Jersey, with 50,234 reported cases of Lyme disease in 2020. So Lyme is a huge deal. And for me personally, being outdoors, I am terrified of contracting Lyme disease. I know people personally that have had it in the recent past, some mild cases, some more severe, and most everybody that I know that has had it has really struggled. So preventing Lyme for me is really important, and that plays into the decisions that we make when it comes time to treat our dogs. So I just kind of wanted to be forthcoming about that and my own personal fear of Lyme disease. Okay, so what we're first going to do is just talk about fleas and ticks in general, how they reproduce, and what the risks are associated with a flea and tick infestation. If any of this grosses you out, good, it should. So knowing about this stuff and the risks associated with these little pesties are important to me, right? So we all kind of know, we have to give our dogs something to prevent fleas and ticks. But I think really understanding a little bit more about the behavior of fleas and ticks can help us in the long run protect ourselves, our families, and our dogs. Okay, so fleas. In general, they're pesty and they're gross. They can transmit tapeworm, plague, and typhus. So the plague and typhus are more rare and typically happen in more rural areas, especially here in the States. But tapeworm is a big deal because it can specifically affect children, because children, I know it's gross, but they are accidentally at risk of swallowing fleas, which can put those little buggers down into their tummies. And then the tapeworm can kind of fester. Ugh, gross. All right, so what are fleas and how do they behave? Well, fleas are little tiny bugs, and they are very active when they are breeding, and they need a host to survive and perpetuate. Okay, so they need a host to breed. They have 4 stages. The first is an egg, the second is a larva, the third is a pupa, and the fourth is a flea. So what happens is the flea gets on a host, it feeds, breeds, and the pupa, so we're skipping the egg and the larva stage, is kind of like a wrapped up little larva. We all kind of know what a pupa is from studying like butterflies and moths. But when the flea is in that stage, that's when it can kind of like either stay on the fur of an animal or get buried inside of a carpet or on a couch. And then the larva will get stimulated if like a host walks by, and their body heat and their breathing and movement kind of stimulates the pupa to break open and, start biting the host and cause the reproductive process to start over again. Okay, so I'm going to share a story of one of my clients. I'm not going to use the client's dogs and cats' names, but I'm going to tell you what happened. So, dog walking client of mine lives close by the woods, also lives with a cat that's an outdoor cat. And the cat had an unfortunate encounter with a coyote a couple of years ago. And this cat is a total badass. And she wound up getting out of the coyote's grip. But it was very clear by the bite mark, I guess you would call them ligatures, that she was in this coyote's mouth and he had a good grasp on her, and she probably clawed his eyes out and they dropped the cat. But in the process, the cat contracted fleas. And despite being treated for fleas and ticks, my clients had a flea infestation in their house because the cat was in such close contact with a coyote. And wild animals, whether they are mice and rats, bunnies, chipmunks, raccoons, possums, they have or can have fleas. Okay. And I see videos where people are interacting with wild animals, feeding wild animals, luring deer inside their homes with a bucket of corn. And there are these like made for Instagram type of interactions with wild animals. However, wild animals have fleas. And if we come in contact with them, we can run the risk of bringing fleas inside of our home. So, we need to be aware of this if we're doing things like deer hunting or trying to feed raccoons or, being really nice to rats that live under our deck. Okay, we want to make sure that we are aware that these little buggers can get inside the house and cause an infestation. Additionally, when I was growing up, there was just a different culture around wild animals. People wanted to stay away from them at all costs. So you really didn't hear about flea infestations around here. Also, the climate is changing a little bit, so it's warmer later into the season. So, fleas are most active in the summertime months when it's humid, but they can live all year round on a host. So, having an effective flea preventative on your animals that are coming and going from your house is really important. Okay, ticks and tick-borne illnesses. We have the big ones are Lyme disease, anaplasmosis, and Rocky Mountain spotted fever. There's a bunch of other ones, but basically ticks, we all know what the tick looks like. I think they're called arachnids. They look like little dinosaurs, and I hate even the sight of them. They Okay, so it's unanimously kind of concluded by medical professionals that Lyme disease seems to be the most severe out of the tick-borne illnesses, both for humans and for dogs. And they're transmitted by the tick biting the host and transmitting that bacteria, which at first is localized and then spreads throughout the body of the host. According to YaleMedicine.org, the tick has to be attached for more than 10 hours in order to transmit the bacteria. And the most commonly used antibiotic for treating tick-borne illnesses is doxycycline. And it works best if treated immediately after the bite. And just on a personal note, I have taken doxycycline preventatively a couple times after finding a tick that was stuck on me. So, you can get ticks tested if they bite you and you want to see if they have Lyme. If the tick is swollen at all, so it's clear that it's been feeding for any length of time, my doctor has advised me that I take it. The last time I got bit by a tick that I found on me, I brought it in and I was advised that it was no problem. The tick just had not been on for long enough to transmit any diseases. I know that this is a touchy subject. It might be a little gross, but if you are a hairy person, it's just harder because they're so small. It's harder to detect. It's harder to get rid of them before they latch onto you. I have short hair on my head. It makes it a lot easier for me to kind of feel around what's going on. I don't have a lot of body hair, so it's also easier for me to just detect and remove ticks. But if you are somebody that, has a lot of body hair or, doesn't spend a lot of time examining yourself, it's something that you want to consider, especially if you work with dogs or you work outside. You're just at risk. I pick them off of my pants on a daily basis. So please just be aware and try to prevent, these illnesses. Again, I'm terrified of getting Lyme disease and I'm kind of hyper aware. Okay, so let's talk about flea and tick preventatives for dogs, what they are and what they actually do, which I think is something people don't take into consideration when they start giving their dog an ingestible or using a Seresto collar or Frontline. Like, what are these things actually doing? All right, first and foremost, NexGard and Seresto. And when I say NexGard, I'm also including Simparica and Bravecto into that category. And the category is ingestibles. So anything that you feed your dog, they chew up and swallow. I'm going to call them NexGard. Simparica and Bravecto use different chemicals to achieve the same goal, but they all pretty much do the same thing. Seresto collars and NexGard were all introduced in 2013, which once I learned that, I was like, holy cow, it's not even been 10 years since these products have been used. So these are relatively new products and they are extremely powerful. So NexGard uses a chemical called, I'm going to butcher this, afoxolaner. And what it does is it debilitates the central nervous system of fleas and ticks, which kills them once the flea or tick has bitten the host. They are 98% effective in treating flea and tick infestation in dogs and cats. So the ingestible, they work by, the dog chews up the little pellet and that chemical is in their bloodstream for up to 30 days. And when the parasite bites, the parasite dies. So it's very effective in killing the fleas and ticks. Something that you can keep in mind is the NexGard, Simparica, and Bravecto do not repel fleas or ticks. So the flea or tick can still get on the dog. It's not going to fall off because it's going to be like, oh, gross, it smells bad up here, right? It's going to die once it bites your dog. Some risks associated. Well, first of all, there's just not a ton of data, right? These things haven't been around for very long, the ingestibles. Some common side effects after the dog eats the ingestible are vomiting, lethargy, and diarrhea. There have been reported cases of seizures and other neurological issues in dogs that take these ingestibles. The rate of these seizures is still extremely low. So 22 reported cases of seizure-related deaths in 2016 from NexGard, which is pretty darn scary, but when we think about the grand scheme of the number of dogs that are probably taking these ingestibles, number is pretty low. Okay, let's move on to the Seresto collar. So the Seresto works as a repellent and a preventative. It uses two chemicals that I'm not going to name because I'm going to butcher them, but the first will fight fleas at the larva and adult stages, so it'll kill them and repel them at that stage. And the other chemical will work much like the same chemical in NexGard, where it attacks the central nervous system of the parasites, and the parasites die once they bite the host. So the pros are they're effective at both treating and repelling. And I would consider another pro to be that the chemicals in the Seresto collar stay on the skin without going into the dog's bloodstream. So the way that it works is it uses the oil glands in your dog's skin to disperse the chemical. So that can be a pro. Another pro is that it's probably the least expensive of the flea and tick preventatives. A con could be that sometimes the ticks can fall off in your house because the Seresto collar does act as a repellent. So if the tick falls off in your house, it can attach to another one of your animals or your kids or yourself. So that kind of stinks. And also, and this is anecdotal as well as kind of reported on blog posts and such. They're just not as effective as the ingestibles. People still pull, swollen ticks off of their dog when they have the Seresto collar on. Additionally, sometimes the farther away the little bugger is from the neck, they tend to attach onto the hind quarters of the dog or the tail. And, because these collars last so long, sometimes people forget to change them after 8 months. They're also harmful if they're ingested by another dog or another pet, or if your children plays with them, not a great idea. The third type of flea and tick preventative is going to be your frontline products, which are topical treatments. So this is like a liquid that's applied between your dog's shoulder blades, and then it uses the oil glands to disperse the chemical, similarly to the Seresto collar, so it doesn't go into your dog's bloodstream like the NexGard and other ingestibles do. The methoprene, which is the primary chemical in frontline, is what attacks your dog's attacks the flea or tick central nervous system, gets rid of those buggers once they bite. And also frontline protects against mosquitoes and mosquito-borne illnesses. Risks associated are vomiting, diarrhea, and seizures, same as Seresto collar and same as NexGard. Again, very low rate. And the neurological problems seem to affect smaller dogs more than larger dogs with the frontline applications. Another con is the frontline efficacy is contingent on the application. So you really have to put it on properly. It can't be rubbed off. It can't be wet within 24 hours of an application. It's not great for dogs with skin allergies. And if you start snooping around online, you can see some pretty horrible stories of dogs just having terrible skin reactions to the front line. So that's also something to take into consideration if you have a dog that is, has sensitive skin. Okay, so that covers our 3 chemical treatments for fleas and ticks. We also have natural preventatives. So the big names in the natural preventatives are going to be Cedarcide and Wondercide. Both use cedar oil to quote unquote naturally repel fleas and ticks. So again, these are repellents. They are not treatments or preventatives or anything like that. They are going to work like mosquito repellent. So they use, again, cedar oil, lemongrass oil, peppermint oil, and lavender oil. Wondercide also uses sesame, neem, and rosemary oils. Once again, they don't treat or kill fleas or ticks. They repel them. You can use them in your yard and in your house as well. Actually, again, they're natural products. They are really kind of viscous and oily. So, the pros are they're not chemical. So there's no reports of vomiting, diarrhea, nausea, lethargy. There's no reports of neurological issues with natural preventatives. The big con is that, they don't really work. I hate to say it, but, they will repel fleas and ticks, but you need to really liberally apply them to your dog. the biggest problem that I have with these products are, our dogs typically will get fleas and ticks on their face because they will stick their nose in like long grass and then the ticks will jump up on their face. And I don't know about you guys, but I am not, liberally applying Cedarside or Wondercide around my dog's nose and mouth and eyes. That's going to be a pretty unpleasant experience for them. Additionally, in order to properly apply these products, if you look on the product websites, you literally have to basically bathe your dog in them, really spray it on liberally, get it inside their coat, do a ton of applying to really get the full benefit of, being able to actually repel the fleas and the ticks. Okay, so those are our options for flea and tick preventatives. And let's talk about things that are going to affect your decision upon, which one you're going to choose to use on your dog. And I should just mention that there is a reason why we do not use flea and tick preventatives on human beings. These are extremely powerful chemicals when we're talking about ingestibles, Seresto colors, and Frontline. Okay. Even though we love our dogs, they're still dogs. So we do treat them with chemicals that we would never use on humans, okay? And that's just the fact of the matter. Okay, so things that are going to affect your decision. For me, first and foremost, it's going to be my lifestyle. So our dogs go into the woods multiple times per week. We live in we have sidewalks here, but there's just a lot of wooded areas. So even when we're walking on the street, our dogs are still in tall grass and leaves, stuff like that. So our lifestyle is, putting our dogs at a higher risk of getting specifically ticks. So we choose to give our dogs ingestibles. It's not something that we take lightly or that we like to do, because there is a risk associated. But those ingestibles work. There's no two ways about it. They kill ticks. We find ticks on our floor in the summertime, and they are, the size of a pencil point, shriveled up and dead. They didn't even have a chance. So again, there's not as much of a chance of the tick getting from the dog to us. And, again, my fear of Lyme disease is pretty high. So I want to make sure that I'm doing whatever I can to make sure that we stay healthy so we're able to continue doing what we love to do. Contrarily, if you live in the city and your dog never goes to the woods and, has a short coat, you might not want to choose to give them a ingestible. You might not need to. Maybe if you know that you're going to be taking a trip on a weekend up to Vermont to visit a family member or go spend time with friends and you're going to take your dog, maybe you can get away with putting a Seresto collar on a few days prior, go up, take the trip, come back, take the Seresto collar off a few days after and put it back in the closet until next time you need it in a few months, and just use natural preventatives. If you have an old dog and your dog never leaves your yard, it might not be necessary for you to give your dog a flea and tick preventative if they are, kind of incapacitated. So, that's kind of something to keep in mind as well. Second consideration is the type of your dog's coat. If you have a long-haired dog, you might spend an hour after you're out for a hike checking for ticks and you're still going to miss them. It's just really difficult if your dog has a long coat or a double coat to catch everything. Additionally, if your dog has dark fur, it's harder to see ticks. Lighter colored dogs, it's just way easier to see them, right? Ticks are just little black dots, basically. And if your dog is yellow, you can see them easier. If your dog, contrarily, is really short-haired, fawn color, pit bull, you can see them really easily. Right? There's not much distance between the end of that hair follicle or the hair and your dog's skin. I mean, some of these dogs, they're practically hairless. It's really easy to see if they have ticks on them. So just a little bit of due diligence can go a long way. You might not need to give an ingestible or use a harsh chemical. Number 5 is, do you actually have time to inspect your dog? So for us, for example, like one of our dogs has long hair, the other has short hair. They're both black. We will spend time inspecting our dogs after a hike, but we don't spend enough time in order to look under every single nook and cranny. So again, we will find fleas and ticks. I'm sorry, not fleas. Oh God, Laurie would kill me. We do find dead ticks on the floor, again, before they had the chance to even really latch on, even upon really inspecting. So in order to thoroughly inspect, it takes a long time. The other consideration is, do your dogs live outside your house? If your dogs are living outside your house, it might not be as essential to give them that, ingestible. Maybe you could get away with a Seresto collar because you're not so worried about, fleas and ticks actually coming inside your house. But I would treat them with something because chances are if a dog lives outside your house, they're going to have contact with wild animals. You want to make sure that they are protected. And the other consideration, the last consideration here would be where you live. So elevations over 530 meters or 1,740 feet don't usually have ticks. States with no disease-carrying ticks are Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, North Dakota, Utah, and Wyoming. The square states don't have disease-carrying ticks, right? So that's kind of cool information to know as well. So that might mean that you could get away with using a natural preventative for fleas and ticks. Or maybe you're going to want to use a Seresto collar for fleas in the summer months, but in the winter months where, fleas aren't going to be as much of an issue, maybe you can get away with using a natural preventative. I am a big fan of using the least amount of chemical treatment that you possibly can get away with. Okay, so after you consider all the things that I mentioned, what's the least amount of risk you have to expose your dog to in order to make sure that they stay healthy and safe? Again, with our two dogs, they're black. One of them has long fur. They're in the woods all the time. They play sports. I'm in the woods all the time. I don't want to get a tick-borne illness. That leads us to make the decision to give our dogs the ingestible. Again, it's up for discussion. I don't like doing it. But it's just the choices that we make personally. And again, we do that because it's pretty much 100% effective at that Lyme. And Lyme is just so debilitating if you get it. So in conclusion, I hope that you got a little bit of something out of this podcast episode. If you like what you're listening to, please rate and review the podcast, share it with your friends. Thank you so much for all the positive feedback from the podcast. We really enjoy doing these episodes and we'll keep doing them as long as we have time and as long as you guys find what we have to say to be useful. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. We are always taking questions for the podcast. So if you're not a client and you want to ask us a question, you can visit our Instagram pages at FitPet Boston or at FPB Talks, or you can email me at leah@fitpetboston.com. I'll get back to you. And as far as I'm concerned, I always will entertain questions for the podcast. We get some little Looney Tunes every once in a while. But we love doing Q&A podcasts. If you missed the one that we did last week with Jamie and Laurie, please check it out. We answered some really great questions, and it's always a pleasure for me to sit with Jamie. And in conclusion, thank you for listening. I will see you next time, hopefully with another interview. And if not, Laurie and I will be coming at you with something specific. Have a great week, everybody.